Jasmine Washington, a 28-year-old black tech billionaire, stands frozen in the aisle of Flight 782 as a white man, Bradley Thompson, occupies her first-class seat. Flight attendant Nathan announces the plane is grounded. Security officers rush aboard amid gasps from passengers. Jasmine's phone buzzes with breaking news notifications. Before we dive into this shocking story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button to join our community. You won't believe how this seemingly simple airplane confrontation turns into a power move that changes an entire industry forever. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jasmine Washington's Atlanta penthouse, casting long shadows across her minimalist living room. At 28, Jasmine had accomplished what most people couldn't achieve in several lifetimes. As the creator of Jazz Wallet, a revolutionary finance app that had democratized investment opportunities for millions of Americans, she had amassed a fortune exceeding $4 billion. Yet, as she stood by the window sipping her black coffee, her mind wasn't on her wealth but on the crucial meeting awaiting her in San Francisco. "Ms. Washington, your schedule for today is confirmed," called Darnell Brooks, her executive assistant of 5 years, as he entered with a tablet in hand. "The car will be here in 30 minutes. Are you sure you don't want to take the private jet? It would be much more convenient, especially considering the importance of this meeting." Jasmine shook her head, setting down her coffee mug on the marble countertop. "We've been over this, Darnell. I prefer commercial. Keeps me grounded, connected to the real world." She smiled at her unintentional pun. "Besides, the environmental impact of flying private for one person is something I can't justify, no matter how important this meeting is." Darnell nodded, though his expression betrayed his concern. "I've arranged for enhanced security protocols at the airport, though they'll be discreet as you requested. The board is still expecting you at 4 p.m. Pacific Time." As Darnell reviewed the day's schedule, Jasmine's mind drifted back to her childhood home in Atlanta's South Side. She could almost smell her mother's cooking in their small kitchen, hear her father's laughter as he returned from his second job. The neighborhood had been struggling, with more payday loan shops than grocery stores, more liquor outlets than banks. It was this financial desert that had inspired Jazz Wallet in the first place. She remembered the day her high school economics teacher, Mr. Patterson, had taken them on a field trip to the financial district. While the gleaming towers had impressed her classmates, Jasmine had been struck by something else entirely, the absence of faces that looked like hers. That day, she had promised herself that she would not only enter those towers but would build her own. "Ms. Washington." Darnell's voice pulled her back to the present. "We should get moving soon. There's a protest downtown that might affect traffic to the airport." Jasmine nodded, walking to her bedroom to grab her carry-on luggage. Unlike other billionaires who traveled with entourages and multiple bags, she prided herself on self-sufficiency and minimalism. One small carry-on contained everything she needed for her 2-day trip. As she zipped up her bag, her phone rang. It was Elijah Morris, her first investor and now the chairman of her board. "Jasmine, just checking in before your flight. This deal with Global Tech could revolutionize how we implement the banking features. Are you ready?" "Born ready, Elijah," she replied with confidence she didn't entirely feel. The deal would indeed be transformative, potentially bringing Jazz Wallet services to underbanked populations globally. "I'll call you when I land." 45 minutes later, Jasmine sat in the back of her modest electric sedan, watching Atlanta's skyline recede in the rearview mirror. The protest had indeed clogged several main arteries of the city, forcing her driver to take alternative routes. "Ms. Washington, we might be cutting it close for your flight," the driver warned, glancing at the navigation system. Jasmine nodded, a flicker of anxiety rising in her chest. Despite her billions, she couldn't control traffic or time itself. She hated being late, a punctuality instilled by her father who had always said, "In a world that expects you to fail, never give them the excuse of tardiness." By the time they pulled up to the departures level at Atlanta International Airport, Jasmine had just 50 minutes until her flight. Normally, she allowed a 2-hour buffer, but today would require efficiency. "Thank you," she told the driver, grabbing her carry-on and rushing toward the entrance. As she walked briskly through the automatic doors, an uneasy feeling settled in her stomach. She attributed it to the rushed morning and the high stakes of her San Francisco meeting, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that something else entirely awaited her on this journey. Atlanta International Airport hummed with the chaotic energy of thousands of travelers, each focused on their own destinations. Jasmine navigated through the crowd with practiced ease, her simple but elegant black pantsuit and minimal jewelry attracting little attention. This was exactly how she preferred it. Despite her face occasionally appearing in business magazines and tech publications, she could still move through public spaces relatively unrecognized, a privilege she cherished. The check-in kiosk confirmed her first-class seat on Flight 782 to San Francisco. As she headed toward the security checkpoint, she noticed the lines were longer than usual. Checking her watch, she calculated she still had enough time, but only just. Next, called a TSA agent at the priority security lane. Jasmine stepped forward, presenting her boarding pass and ID. The agent, whose nameplate read Keith Monroe, glanced at her documents, then back at her face with obvious skepticism. "First class?" he asked, his tone making the question feel like an accusation. "Yes," Jasmine replied simply, maintaining eye contact. Monroe studied her ID again, scrutinizing it under the light as if expecting to find evidence of forgery. Meanwhile, Jasmine noticed a white businessman in an expensive suit being waved through the adjacent lane with barely a glance at his credentials. "Purpose of your trip to San Francisco?" Monroe continued, questions he hadn't asked the previous passengers. "Business," Jasmine answered, keeping her tone neutral despite the growing irritation. After what felt like an unnecessarily long inspection, Monroe finally returned her documents. "Put your bags on the belt, take off your shoes, empty your pockets." As Jasmine complied with the standard procedures, she couldn't help but notice several white passengers being directed through the expedited scanner while she was motioned toward the more thorough body scanner. "Arms up, feet on the markers," instructed another agent, sounding bored. These moments, these small, persistent reminders of differential treatment, were familiar companions throughout Jasmine's life. Even with billions in her accounts, some things remained unchanged. After clearing security, Jasmine checked the time. The unexpected delay had cost her precious minutes. She needed coffee before the flight but would have to be quick. She headed to a premium coffee shop near her gate. "I'll have a large Americano, please," she told the young barista, pulling out her phone to pay. The barista, a college-aged white woman, glanced at Jasmine's simple attire and raised an eyebrow. "That's $7. The regular coffee is $4 if that's better for your budget." Jasmine felt a flash of familiar annoyance but pushed it aside. "The Americano is fine, thank you." She tapped her phone to pay and added a generous tip, which the barista noticed with slight embarrassment. While waiting for her coffee, Jasmine overheard a loud voice from a nearby table. "These airlines really need to enforce their boundaries better," a middle-aged white man was saying to his companion. "Last flight I was on, someone from economy tried to use the first-class bathroom. I mean, you get what you pay for in this world, right?" His companion nodded in agreement as Jasmine collected her coffee, avoiding eye contact. As she walked toward her gate, she realized the loud man was heading in the same direction. He continued his complaints about airline service all the way to Gate A22, where Flight 782 to San Francisco was preparing to board. Finding a seat at the crowded gate area, Jasmine opened her laptop to review her presentation once more. The meeting with Global Tech was potentially worth billions, and every detail needed to be perfect. "Is this seat taken?" It was the same loud man from the coffee shop. "No, go ahead," Jasmine replied, shifting slightly to make room. The man sat down heavily, spreading his legs wide and effectively claiming the shared armrest. His carry-on luggage. A high-end brand that practically screamed its price tag, rested prominently in front of him. Bradley Thompson, he introduced himself with a confidence that suggested his name should mean something to her. Heading to San Francisco? Yes, Jasmine answered simply, hoping to end the conversation there. Business or pleasure, he persisted. Business. Bradley nodded as if confirming something to himself. I go back and forth every month. Fintech consultant. What about you? Administrative assistant. Jasmine looked up from her laptop, meeting his eyes. No. Her tone must have conveyed her desire to end the conversation because Bradley turned away, though not without a slightly affronted expression. The gate agent began the boarding announcements, calling for passengers needing special assistance, followed by first-class passengers and elite status members. Jasmine gathered her belongings, joining the forming line. Bradley rushed ahead, positioning himself at the front despite not being the first to arrive at the line. She noticed him watching her as she took her place in the first-class boarding group, his eyes narrowing slightly. As she waited, Jasmine sent a quick text to Darnell, about to board. Something feels off about this flight. She couldn't explain the sensation, but years of navigating spaces where she was unwelcome had honed her instincts for trouble. Trust your gut, Darnell texted back immediately. Call me when you land. The gate agent scanned Bradley's boarding pass first, giving him a practiced smile. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Thompson. As Jasmine stepped forward next, she caught Bradley glancing back at her, his expression unreadable but somehow unsettling. She handed over her boarding pass, unaware that this routine flight was about to become anything but ordinary. The jetway stretched before Jasmine like a portal to another world, its windowless walls creating a liminal space between ground and air. She walked steadily, carry-on rolling smoothly behind her, mentally reviewing her upcoming presentation points. First-class passengers streamed ahead, most of them men in business attire moving with the entitled confidence of frequent travelers. Flight attendant Alicia Carter greeted passengers at the aircraft door with a warm smile. Welcome aboard Flight 782 to San Francisco. Thank you, Jasmine replied, returning the smile as she stepped into the cabin. The first-class cabin gleamed with subtle luxury, 12 spacious seats arranged in a 2-to-2 configuration, warm lighting creating an atmosphere of exclusive comfort. Jasmine checked her boarding pass again, Seat 2A, a window seat on the left side. As she approached the first row, she saw Bradley Thompson already settled in the second row, his jacket hung up and a pre-departure beverage in hand. When she reached row 2, she stopped abruptly. Bradley was sitting in 2A, her assigned seat. Excuse me, she said politely, I think you might be in my seat. Bradley looked up from his phone, his expression shifting from annoyance to something cooler as he recognized her from the gate. No, this is my seat. He returned to his phone without further acknowledgement. I have 2A on my boarding pass, Jasmine explained, maintaining her composure as she held up her digital boarding pass for him to see. Bradley barely glanced at it. Well, there must be some mistake because I'm in my correct seat. His tone carried an edge of finality, as if the mere suggestion that he might be wrong was absurd. May I see your boarding pass, please? Jasmine asked, her voice still level but firmer now. With an exaggerated sigh, Bradley pulled up his boarding pass on his phone and flashed it quickly, too quickly for Jasmine to verify the details. See. 2A, now if you don't mind, I'm trying to prepare for an important meeting. The dismissal was clear, but Jasmine stood her ground. I'd like to see that again, please. My pass clearly shows 2A as well. Other first-class passengers were boarding now, some forced to maneuver around Jasmine who stood in the aisle. A few cast irritated glances her way. Bradley's expression hardened. Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is my seat. Maybe you misread your boarding pass. Maybe you're in 22A, back in economy. I know what my boarding pass says, Jasmine replied, feeling a familiar heat rising in her chest, the sensation that had accompanied countless moments when her competence, her belonging, her very presence had been questioned. Bradley turned to the passenger across the aisle, an older white man who had been watching the exchange with interest. "Can you believe this?" he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The disruption attracted the attention of flight attendant Nathan Reed, who approached with a practiced neutral expression. "Is there a problem here?" "This woman claims I'm in her seat," Bradley said before Jasmine could speak. "But I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Nathan turned to Jasmine. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass?" Jasmine presented her phone with the digital pass clearly displayed, Flight 782, Seat 2A, Washington, Jasmine. Nathan nodded and turned to Bradley. "Sir, could I see your boarding pass as well?" Bradley displayed his pass again, but this time Nathan took the phone to examine it properly. The pass showed, Flight 782, Seat 2A, Thompson, Bradley. "This is unusual," Nathan said, looking between the two boarding passes with confusion. "Both passes show the same seat assignment." "Well, I was here first," Bradley stated firmly. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, isn't that right?" He chuckled, looking around for support from fellow passengers. Several passengers were watching now, most with expressions of impatience rather than concern. An older woman in 1B whispered something to her companion while glancing back at Jasmine. "Perhaps there was a system error," Nathan suggested, his tone becoming placating. "Ma'am, let me check if there's another seat available in first class." "There's no need to check," Jasmine replied calmly. "I booked and paid for seat 2A specifically because I need to work during this flight. The window seat provides the privacy I require." Bradley scoffed. "Well, I need this seat for the same reason. I have work to prepare for a major client meeting." Nathan checked his tablet. "It seems we have one open seat left in first class, 3C, an aisle seat." "That's not my assigned seat," Jasmine insisted. "Look," Bradley interjected, his voice rising, "I don't know how you ended up with a boarding pass for my seat. Maybe it's a legitimate error, maybe it's something else, but I'm not moving." The implication hung in the air, causing Jasmine's jaw to tighten. She knew exactly what he was suggesting, that she had somehow forged or falsified her boarding pass to upgrade herself. "Are you implying I fabricated my boarding pass?" she asked directly. "I'm not implying anything," Bradley replied with a shrug that suggested the opposite. "I'm just saying I have the correct seat, and I was here first." More passengers were boarding now, the aisle becoming congested as the standoff continued. Nathan looked increasingly uncomfortable, caught between protocol and an unusual situation. "Sir, do you have your original booking confirmation?" Jasmine asked Bradley, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the building tension. "I don't need to prove anything to you," Bradley replied sharply. "Flight attendant, please handle this situation. I have important work to do before we land." Nathan turned to Jasmine, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, perhaps for now, you could take 3C so we can get the flight underway. We can sort this out properly once we're in the air." Jasmine felt the familiar weight of compromise pressing down on her, the expectation that she should be the one to accommodate, to step aside, to make things easier for everyone else regardless of who was right. It was a weight she had carried throughout her life, from school classrooms to boardrooms, and even now as a billionaire, apparently in first-class cabins. "No," she said firmly. "I will not take a seat that isn't mine. This is a matter of principle." The word principle seemed to trigger something in Bradley. "Oh, here we go," he said loudly. "Making a scene over nothing. Why am I not surprised?" He looked around the cabin as if seeking allies. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman in 1D averted her eyes, while the older gentleman across from Bradley gave a small nod of apparent agreement. Nathan's expression tightened. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but we need to get the flight underway. Would you be willing to take the other first-class seat for now?" and we can address this with customer service upon arrival. Jasmine felt all eyes on her, the weight of being viewed as difficult, as the problem, as the one disrupting everyone's day. It was a familiar weight, but one she had promised herself she would no longer carry when she was in the right. "I'd like to speak with the captain," she said calmly. "And I'd like to see this gentleman's physical boarding pass or booking confirmation, not just the digital version which could potentially be altered." Bradley's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to prove anything. You're just trying to steal my seat." The irony of his accusation wasn't lost on Jasmine, but before she could respond, Nathan spoke again. "Sir, do you have your confirmation email or the credit card you used for booking? That might help us resolve this quickly." Bradley's expression flickered with something, concern, before settling back into indignation. "My secretary handled the booking. I don't have all that information with me. But this is clearly my assigned seat." "Then I'd like to speak with the captain," Jasmine repeated. "I'm not moving from this spot until this situation is properly addressed." Nathan hesitated, then nodded. "I'll get the captain. In the meantime, ma'am, could you please step aside to allow other passengers to board?" Jasmine moved to the side of the aisle, feeling the stares of everyone boarding. A young white woman caught her eye and gave a small, supportive smile, but most passengers simply looked annoyed at the delay. As Nathan disappeared to the cockpit, Bradley turned to his seatmate across the aisle. "Some people just don't know their place," he said, just loud enough for Jasmine and several nearby passengers to hear. The double meaning hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Jasmine felt her resolve strengthen. This was no longer just about a seat, it was about something far more fundamental, and she would not back down. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to take the alternative seat while we sort this out." Nathan had returned, his tone firmer now, the pressure of a delayed departure evident in his clipped words. "We can't hold up an entire flight over a seating discrepancy." Jasmine stood her ground, maintaining the calm demeanor that had served her well in countless high-pressure negotiations. "This isn't merely a discrepancy. Someone has taken my assigned seat, and I'm being asked to accommodate that. I don't think that's fair or appropriate." Bradley made a show of checking his watch. "For God's sake, just take the other seat. Some of us have actual important meetings to get to." The emphasis on actual wasn't subtle, and Jasmine felt her patience wearing thinner. She turned back to Nathan. "I'd still like to speak with the captain, please." "The captain is conducting pre-flight checks," Nathan replied. "She's asked me to resolve this situation quickly." "The captain is a woman?" Bradley interrupted with raised eyebrows. "Well, that explains the disorganization." A collective intake of breath sounded from those close enough to hear. The comment hung in the air, its casual sexism creating another layer of tension. Jasmine remained composed. "I'm not moving until this situation is properly addressed. I booked and paid for seat 2A, and that's where I should be seated." A middle-aged white passenger in row 3, whom Jasmine now recognized as Calvin Harris, a banking executive she'd seen at industry conferences, chimed in. "Just give her the other first-class seat so we can get moving. Some of us have schedules to keep." "Exactly," Bradley agreed, gesturing toward Calvin as if he'd made an irrefutable point. Jasmine noticed several passengers had their phones out, recording the confrontation. The videos would likely be on social media before they even took off, assuming they took off at all. "I'd like to see your boarding pass again, sir," Jasmine said directly to Bradley. "The physical version, if you have it." "I use mobile boarding passes like everyone else in the 21st century, Bradley retorted. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "Then please show the digital version again," she insisted. "Let's verify the details together." Bradley's jaw tightened. "This is harassment. I feel threatened." He looked at Nathan. "I want this woman removed from the first-class cabin immediately." The accusation of feeling threatened by her presence, a 5'6" professional woman standing calmly in the aisle, was a tactic Jasmine had seen before. It was the weaponization of fear, playing into dangerous stereotypes about black aggression. "No one is threatening you, sir," Jasmine replied evenly. "I'm simply trying to resolve a seating issue." A young white woman in row 4, who had been watching intently, suddenly stood up. "She's being completely reasonable. Why are you acting like she's doing something wrong by asking to sit in her assigned seat?" The unexpected support momentarily stunned the cabin into silence. "Thank you," Jasmine said to the woman with genuine appreciation. "Taylor Wilson," the woman introduced herself with a quick nod. "And for what it's worth, I've been watching this whole thing. You haven't done anything wrong." Nathan looked increasingly uncomfortable. "I'm going to call the ground supervisor to assist us." As Nathan picked up the cabin phone, Jasmine pulled out her own phone and dialed Darnell. When he answered, she spoke quietly but clearly. "Darnell, I'm having an issue on the flight. Someone is in my assigned seat and refusing to move. The flight attendant seems unwilling to properly address it." "Give me the details," Darnell replied, his voice switching immediately to crisis management mode. Jasmine provided the flight information while Bradley watched her with narrowed eyes. "Who are you calling?" he demanded. "Are you trying to intimidate me with some supposed connections?" Jasmine ignored him, finishing her conversation with Darnell, who promised to contact airline executives immediately. The tension in the cabin was palpable now. Other passengers were whispering among themselves, some clearly annoyed by the delay, others watching with interest as the drama unfolded. For Jasmine, the situation had triggered memories of countless other moments throughout her life: being asked to move to the back of classrooms despite arriving early, being questioned about her presence in exclusive spaces, having to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Each time, the expectation had been the same. Accommodate, don't make waves, accept the injustice for the comfort of others. But Jasmine had stopped making that compromise years ago. Her success had been built on knowing her worth and refusing to accept less than what she deserved. This principle extended beyond business to every aspect of her life, including, apparently, airline seating. Do you agree that Jasmine should stand her ground in this situation? Comment number 1 if you believe she's right to insist on her assigned seat, or number 2 if you think she should just take the other first-class seat to avoid delays. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you're enjoying this story of courage and principle. What do you think will happen when the ground supervisor arrives? Will Jasmine's call to her assistant make a difference? Let's find out as our story continues. The cabin door opened, and 2 uniformed security officers stepped aboard, a black woman whose nameplate read Laura Jackson and a white man identified as Michael Stevens. "What's going on here?" Officer Jackson asked, looking between Nathan, Jasmine, and Bradley. Nathan quickly explained the situation: 2 passengers with boarding passes for the same seat. "She's clearly trying to upgrade herself," Bradley interjected. "Check her ID. Her boarding pass must be fake." Officer Jackson turned to Jasmine. "Ma'am, may I see your ID and boarding pass?" Jasmine provided both without hesitation. "I'd also like to see this gentleman's boarding pass properly examined. He's been reluctant to show it clearly." Officer Stevens approached Bradley. "Sir, we need to verify your boarding pass and ID as well." Bradley's confidence seemed to waver slightly, but he handed over his phone. "This is ridiculous. I'm a platinum member with this airline. I fly this route twice a month." As the officers examined both boarding passes, the ground supervisor, Howard Phillips, boarded the aircraft. He was a middle-aged man with a harried expression that suggested this wasn't the first seating dispute he'd handled today. "Let's get this sorted quickly," he said, pulling out a tablet. "I can verify the original bookings in our system." While Howard worked on his tablet, Jasmine noticed Bradley shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His earlier bravado seemed to be fading, replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. "That's odd," Howard muttered, looking up from his tablet with a frown. According to our system, Seat 2A was indeed booked by and assigned to Jasmine Washington. Sir, your original assignment shows as 17C. Bradley's face flushed. That's impossible. Check again. Howard tapped a few more times on his tablet. I've checked twice. MS. Washington booked her ticket 3 weeks ago and specifically selected Seat 2A. Your booking from 2 days ago was for an economy seat, 17C. The revelation sent a murmur through the cabin. Bradley's face had turned from red to an almost ashen color. Let me see that, he demanded, reaching for Howard's tablet. Officer Stevens stepped forward. Sir, please remain in your seat. Howard continued examining the data on his tablet, his frown deepening. This is unusual. I'm seeing a digital modification timestamp on your boarding pass, sir. It appears it may have been altered after issuance. That's absurd, Bradley sputtered, but his protest lacked the conviction of his earlier statements. We can verify this easily, Howard said, tapping his tablet again. We have security camera footage from the gate, and all boarding pass scans are logged in our system. At the mention of security footage, Bradley seemed to shrink in his seat. Howard looked up from his tablet, his expression now serious. Sir, our system shows your boarding pass was originally scanned as 17C at the gate. Somehow, between the gate and the aircraft door, it changed to 2A. I want to press charges, Jasmine said quietly but firmly. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Howard nodded slowly, then did a double take as he looked more closely at Jasmine. Wait, are you Jasmine Washington of Jazz Wallet? The question caught Jasmine off guard. She rarely used her status, preferring to be treated like any other passenger, but in this case, the recognition might help resolve the situation. Yes, I am. The cabin erupted in murmurs. Several passengers looked at her with new interest, some with embarrassment as they realized they had witnessed, and in some cases, contributed to, the harassment of a well-known business leader. MS. Washington, I sincerely apologize for this situation, Howard said, his demeanor shifting to one of deep respect mixed with mortification. We will resolve this immediately. Bradley, sensing the changing tide, attempted a new strategy. I had no idea who she was. This is all a misunderstanding, sir, Howard interrupted firmly, our system shows clear evidence of boarding pass tampering, which is a federal offense. I need you to gather your belongings and exit the aircraft with these officers. You can't be serious, Bradley protested, but with significantly less conviction than before. I'm not going anywhere. Captain Sharon Fitzgerald emerged from the cockpit, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was a tall woman in her 50s with short gray hair and the confidence of someone who had navigated both aircraft and workplace challenges for decades. What's the situation? She asked Howard directly. After a brief explanation, she turned to Jasmine. Ms. Washington, I apologize for this experience on our airline. We'll have this resolved momentarily. Then, addressing Bradley, Sir, you need to deplane immediately. This is not a request. Bradley looked around desperately, perhaps hoping for support from fellow passengers, but found none. Even Calvin Harris was now avoiding eye contact. This is reverse discrimination, Bradley declared loudly as he finally stood up, gathering his belongings. I'm being targeted because I'm a white man. I'll be calling my attorney about this. As security prepared to escort Bradley off the plane, Captain Fitzgerald addressed the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We've had a security situation that requires us to remain at the gate temporarily. We'll be on our way to San Francisco as soon as possible. The word security sent another ripple through the cabin. Passengers who had been annoyed by the delay now looked concerned, some casting sympathetic glances toward Jasmine. As Bradley was led past her in the aisle, he leaned in and whispered, "You have no idea who you're messing with." Officer Jackson immediately pulled him back. "Sir, that sounds like a threat." I suggest you remain silent until we reach the terminal. Jasmine maintained her composure, though her heart raced at the implied threat. She had faced intimidation before, but this felt different, more personal, more targeted. As Bradley was escorted off the plane, Taylor Wilson approached from her seat. "Are you okay?" That was intense. "I'm fine, thank you," Jasmine replied, genuine appreciation in her voice. "And thank you for speaking up earlier." "I couldn't just sit there," Taylor said with a shrug. What he was doing was so obviously wrong. Howard approached again, his expression deeply apologetic. "Ms. Washington, please take your rightful seat. The captain has requested a thorough security sweep of the aircraft before departure, standard procedure when we have an incident like this. It should only take about 30 minutes. Jasmine nodded, finally settling into seat 2A, her assigned seat, as Nathan approached with a glass of champagne. "With our compliments," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "I apologize for not handling the situation better initially." Jasmine accepted the champagne but said nothing. The apology felt hollow after she had been asked repeatedly to give up her rightful seat to accommodate someone who, it now appeared, had deliberately targeted her. As she sipped the champagne, her phone buzzed with a text from Darnell, "Security situation on your flight making the news already. Are you safe? Do you need anything?" Looking around the cabin at the now subdued passengers, some of whom were stealing glances at her with new recognition, Jasmine realized that what had begun as a simple seating dispute had evolved into something much more significant. The question was, why had Bradley Thompson targeted her specifically? And what had he meant by his parting threat? The aircraft remained at the gate, the usual pre-departure bustle replaced by an atmosphere of tense anticipation. Security personnel moved through the cabin, conducting their sweep with methodical precision. Some passengers whispered among themselves, casting occasional glances toward Jasmine, while others occupied themselves with phones and tablets, many undoubtedly searching for information about the woman at the center of the commotion. Jasmine sat quietly in seat 2A, her mind racing despite her outwardly calm demeanor. She had opened her laptop but found herself unable to focus on the presentation she'd planned to review. Instead, she kept replaying Bradley's parting words, "You have no idea who you're messing with." The threat felt too specific, too personal to be merely the angry bluster of an entitled passenger caught in wrongdoing. Ground Supervisor Howard Phillips returned to the first-class cabin, leaning down to speak with Jasmine in a lowered voice. "Ms. Washington, we've uncovered some concerning information. Could you step into the jetway with me for a moment? The captain would like to speak with you privately." Jasmine nodded, closing her laptop and following Howard off the plane. In the jetway stood Captain Sharon Fitzgerald alongside a man and woman in plain clothes who immediately presented FBI credentials. "Ms. Washington, I'm Agent Derek Johnson, and this is Agent Melissa Kim," the man introduced them. "We need to ask you some questions about Bradley Thompson. Have you ever met Mr. Thompson before today?" Agent Kim asked, her expression serious. "No, never," Jasmine replied. "Though he seemed to take an unusual interest in me at the gate." Agent Johnson nodded. "We have reason to believe this wasn't a random incident. Our preliminary investigation suggests Mr. Thompson specifically targeted you. Security footage from the gate area shows him photographing your boarding pass while you were reviewing documents," Agent Kim explained, showing Jasmine a still image from the airport cameras. The image clearly showed Bradley leaning over, his phone angled toward the boarding pass on Jasmine's lap while she focused on her laptop. He then used a specialized application on his phone to create a counterfeit boarding pass with your seat assignment but his name, Agent Johnson continued. "This level of premeditation suggests this wasn't merely about getting a better seat." Captain Fitzgerald interjected, "Given the circumstances, we're taking this very seriously as both a security threat and a potential criminal matter." Jasmine processed this information, a chill running through her despite the warm jetway. Why would he target me specifically? If he didn't know who I was until the supervisor recognized me. Agent Kim consulted her tablet. We're looking into that. Mr. Thompson is currently being questioned, but he's not cooperating. However, this isn't the first incident of this nature. What do you mean? Jasmine asked. There have been 3 similar incidents reported in the past month on various airlines, Agent Johnson explained. All involved black passengers with first-class or business-class seats who were challenged by white passengers claiming the same seats. In each case, the legitimate passenger was pressured to move to another seat or even to economy class. You think this is some kind of organized targeting? Jasmine asked, the implications settling heavily on her shoulders. We're investigating that possibility, Agent Kim replied. What's different in your case is that we caught it in action, and given your profile, there's likely to be more scrutiny. Howard, who had been listening silently, added, we've also discovered Mr. Thompson has a history of complaints filed against him by our flight attendants, mostly on this route. Nothing that rose to this level before, but there's a pattern of problematic behavior. As they spoke, Agent Johnson received a message on his phone. After reading it, he looked up with a grim expression. We've gained access to Mr. Thompson's phone. There are messages suggesting this was indeed a targeted action. He showed Jasmine a screenshot, a text conversation between Bradley and someone identified only as V. V, is she on the flight? Bradley, yes. Seat 2A as you said. V, remember, just create enough of a scene that she misses the connection. Don't overdo it. Bradley, I know what I'm doing. She'll never make that meeting. Jasmine felt her breath catch. They were trying to prevent me from reaching San Francisco. It appears so, Agent Johnson confirmed. Ms. Washington, are you involved in any sensitive business dealings at the moment? Anything that might motivate someone to interfere with your travel? Jasmine thought immediately of her meeting with Global Tech. If successful, the deal would position JazzWallet to compete directly with several established financial technology companies, particularly VenturePay, whose market share would be most threatened by JazzWallet's expansion. I have an important meeting with Global Tech this afternoon, she explained. If successful, it would significantly impact one of our competitors, VenturePay. Agent Kim made a note. Victor Reynolds is the CEO of VenturePay. Would he have reason to want to disrupt this meeting? Absolutely, Jasmine confirmed. Our new partnership would essentially make their recent platform investments obsolete. They'd lose millions, possibly billions in market value. Captain Fitzgerald and Howard exchanged glances. This has escalated well beyond a seating dispute, the captain observed. Agent Johnson, what do you recommend regarding the flight? We need to complete our security sweep, but I see no reason to further delay the flight once that's done, Johnson replied. Ms. Washington, we'd like to place an air marshal on board for the remainder of the journey, just as a precaution. Jasmine nodded, still processing the revelation that what she'd experienced wasn't merely the familiar discrimination she'd faced throughout her life but something more calculated and sinister. Howard cleared his throat awkwardly. Ms. Washington, I should inform you that this incident has already gone viral. Passengers have posted videos from the cabin, and several news outlets have picked up the story. Of course they have, Jasmine sighed, pulling out her phone to find dozens of missed calls and message notifications. I need to contact my team. While Jasmine stepped aside to call Darnell, Captain Fitzgerald approached. Ms. Washington, on behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for this experience. We failed you at multiple points, from the initial handling of the seating conflict to not recognizing the security implications sooner. Thank you, Captain, Jasmine replied. I appreciate your directness. When Jasmine returned to the cabin a few minutes later, she was aware of the shift in the atmosphere. Passengers who had earlier seemed annoyed by the delay now watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. Nathan, the flight attendant who had initially suggested she take a different seat, couldn't meet her eyes as he busied himself with preparations for departure. As she settled back into seat 2A, Taylor Wilson leaned forward from her seat in row 4. I just saw the news alerts, she whispered. You're that Jasmine Washington? The Jazz Wallet founder? Jasmine nodded with a small smile. That's amazing, Taylor continued. I actually use your app. It helped me start investing last year when I had no idea where to begin. I'm glad to hear that, Jasmine replied genuinely. That's exactly why I created it. Calvin Harris, who had earlier sided with Bradley, was now studiously avoiding looking in Jasmine's direction, his focus fixed firmly on his newspaper. The older woman who had whispered about Jasmine earlier now offered a tentative smile as their eyes met briefly. Captain Fitzgerald's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've completed our security procedures and are preparing for departure. We apologize for the delay and appreciate your patience. Our estimated flying time to San Francisco remains at 4 hours and 20 minutes. As the announcement continued with standard safety information, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Elijah, just saw the news. Are you okay? Do you want to reschedule the global tech meeting? Absolutely not, she texted back. I'll be there as planned. This changes nothing. But as the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, nearly an hour behind schedule, Jasmine knew that wasn't entirely true. Something had changed, not just in the cabin atmosphere where she now sat recognized and respected, but in her understanding of the lengths to which her competitors might go to obstruct her success. The incident had begun as yet another example of the bias she had faced throughout her life. But it had revealed itself to be something both more calculated and more insidious, a deliberate attempt to exploit societal prejudices as a business tactic. It wasn't just about a seat on an airplane, it was about power, market share, and the threatened status quo her success represented. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Jasmine found herself wondering what other obstacles might await her on this journey, and feeling more determined than ever to overcome them. At 36,000 feet above the American heartland, Flight 782 had settled into the steady rhythm of cruise altitude. The cabin lights had been dimmed for passenger comfort, the soft hum of engines providing a constant backdrop to hushed conversations and the occasional chime of the flight attendant call button. In the first-class cabin, however, the atmosphere remained charged with an energy distinctly different from the usual transcontinental journey. Jasmine sat in seat 2A. Her rightful seat, her laptop open as she reviewed her presentation for Global Tech. Despite her outward focus, she remained acutely aware of the periodic glances from fellow passengers and the overly attentive service from flight attendants, particularly Nathan, whose earlier dismissiveness had transformed into almost painful solicitude. Across the aisle, an unassuming man in a gray suit, the Air Marshal Agent Johnson had mentioned, maintained a vigilant but discreet presence. His eyes regularly scanned the cabin in practiced movements that most passengers would never notice but that Jasmine had been trained to recognize during her company's executive security briefings. 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine closed her laptop, needing a break from the financial projections and partnership terms she'd been reviewing. As she massaged her temples against a building tension headache, her phone buzzed with an incoming text from Darnell. FBI provided update. Thompson in custody. Found connections to VenturePay. Reynolds denying involvement. Press going wild with story. How are you holding up? Before she could respond, another message appeared. Global Tech CEO Franco personally called. Said meeting still on. Expressed concern about incident. Seems genuinely outraged on your behalf. Jasmine texted back, managing. Working on presentation now. Have FBI reached out to Reynolds directly? Yes, came Darnell's swift reply. Executing search warrant on VP offices and Thompson's residence. Will update when I know more. The mention of a search warrant elevated the situation beyond what Jasmine had anticipated. This was no longer just about an unpleasant incident on an airplane, it had escalated into a full federal investigation with potential criminal charges. A gentle tap on her shoulder interrupted her thoughts. It was Taylor Wilson, the young woman who had defended her during the confrontation. Sorry to bother you, Taylor said quietly, mindful of other passengers who might be trying to rest. "I just wanted to check if you're doing okay." That whole situation was intense. Jasmine offered a genuine smile. "I'm fine, thank you. And thank you again for speaking up earlier. It's not always easy to be the one voice challenging the room." Taylor nodded, understanding evident in her expression. "I'm in tech too, software engineer at Meridian Systems. I've been the only woman in too many rooms not to recognize what was happening." She hesitated before adding, "I recorded everything, by the way. The video's already got over 1 million views online. People are furious on your behalf." Jasmine hadn't checked social media since boarding, intentionally focusing on preparation for her meeting rather than the public's reaction to the incident. "That was fast," she remarked, uncertain how to feel about her private confrontation becoming public spectacle. "It's resonating because it's so blatant," Taylor explained. "Too often these situations happen without witnesses or evidence. Having it documented makes it harder to dismiss." She paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. "The airline's getting slammed in the comments section. A lot of people are sharing similar experiences." Before their conversation could continue, Captain Fitzgerald's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I've just been informed that we'll need to proceed to a different gate upon arrival in San Francisco. This is purely a logistical change and nothing to be concerned about. Our flight attendants will provide updated connection information prior to landing." Jasmine and Taylor exchanged glances, both recognizing this was likely not merely a logistical change, but related to the ongoing situation. As if confirming this suspicion, the air marshal across the aisle subtly adjusted his position, his hand moving briefly to his earpiece. "I should get back to my seat," Taylor said. "But hey, if you ever need a witness statement or anything for the investigation, just let me know." She passed Jasmine a business card with her contact information. "I appreciate that," Jasmine replied, tucking the card into her jacket pocket. As Taylor returned to her seat, Nathan approached with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Washington, I've received a secure message for you from the FBI. They asked that you review it privately." He handed her the tablet with a deference that bordered on nervous. The tablet displayed a message from Agent Kim. "We've interviewed several passengers who were on Bradley Thompson's previous flights. 3 black passengers have now come forward reporting similar incidents where they were pressured to give up first-class seats. Thompson's phone records show communications with venture pay executives before each incident. Reynolds still denying knowledge but evidence suggesting coordinated effort. We'll meet your flight upon arrival." Agent Kim. Jasmine returned the tablet to Nathan with a quiet thank you, her mind racing with implications. This wasn't an isolated incident or even a spontaneous act of prejudice. The evidence pointed to a systematic campaign targeting black executives and professionals, exploiting racial biases to achieve business advantages. She thought back to Bradley's behavior at the gate, how he had watched her, positioned himself near her, likely waiting for the opportunity to photograph her boarding pass. Had he recognized her specifically, or was she simply targeted as a black woman in first class? Either possibility was disturbing in its own way. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Darnell. "Calvin Harris from your flight reached out through corporate channels. Wants to apologize personally. Says he's deeply ashamed of his behavior." Jasmine wasn't surprised. Calvin Harris was the banking executive who had sided with Bradley during the confrontation. As the CEO of a regional bank that frequently partnered with fintech companies, he likely realized the potential business repercussions of being identified as complicit in racial profiling, especially against someone of Jasmine's stature in the industry. "Tell him I'll consider meeting after my global tech presentation," she texted back. Apologies were important, but they weren't her priority at the moment. Gazing out the window at the vast expanse of clouds below, Jasmine reflected on how what should have been a routine business trip had transformed into something with potentially industry-wide implications. If a company like VenturePay was indeed orchestrating these incidents to disrupt competitors, it represented not just racial discrimination but corporate espionage and potential violations of federal law. The gravity of these realizations was interrupted by a gentle tap on her armrest. It was the elderly woman from Seat 1B who had whispered about her during the initial confrontation. "I owe you an apology, young lady," the woman said softly. "When all that unpleasantness was happening, I made assumptions I shouldn't have. I've been thinking about it this whole flight, and I'm truly sorry." The woman's genuine contrition caught Jasmine slightly off guard. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "It takes courage to recognize and acknowledge our biases." "Not nearly as much courage as it took for you to stand your ground," the woman responded. "My late husband always said that character reveals itself in moments of conflict. You showed remarkable character today." As the woman returned to her seat, Jasmine noticed several other passengers watching the exchange. Some quickly averted their eyes when she looked their way, but others nodded slightly in what seemed like newfound respect. 3 rows back, Calvin Harris had abandoned any pretense of reading his newspaper and was openly observing her, his expression a complex mixture of embarrassment and calculation. When their eyes met, he gave a slight nod that might have been intended as apologetic but came across as merely acknowledging that he'd been caught behaving badly. The remainder of the flight passed with Jasmine alternating between work on her presentation and contemplation of the unfolding investigation. By the time Captain Fitzgerald announced their initial descent into San Francisco, Jasmine had received updates confirming that the FBI had expanded their investigation to include potential corporate espionage charges and violations of civil rights laws. As the aircraft touched down at San Francisco International Airport, Jasmine felt a strange sense of resolution forming within her. What had begun as yet another example of the prejudice she had faced throughout her life had revealed itself to be part of a larger pattern, one that affected not just her but others who shared her identity. Perhaps this incident, painful as it was, could serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers began the familiar ritual of gathering belongings and forming the impatient queue in the aisle. Jasmine remained seated, knowing from Nathan's discreet information that she would be exiting separately once other passengers had deplaned. As Taylor passed by, she gave Jasmine a thumbs up and a supportive smile. Calvin Harris paused briefly near her seat but, meeting her steady gaze, seemed to think better of whatever he had planned to say and continued toward the exit without speaking. Once the cabin had cleared, Nathan approached. "Ms. Washington, the FBI agents and airline representatives are waiting for you in the private conference room at the gate. You'll be exiting through the forward door to avoid the media that's gathered in the terminal." Jasmine nodded, gathering her belongings. As she prepared to leave the aircraft that had become the unexpected stage for this drama, Captain Fitzgerald emerged from the cockpit to speak with her directly. "Ms. Washington, I want to personally apologize again for your experience today," she said. "I've been flying for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of incidents, but the calculated nature of this one is particularly disturbing." "Thank you, Captain," Jasmine replied. "I appreciate how seriously you've taken this situation once the facts became clear. The airline industry has a long way to go in addressing these issues," Captain Fitzgerald acknowledged. "But I hope what happened today, and your courage in standing your ground, might help push us further along that path." As Jasmine finally exited the aircraft, she stepped not just into the jetway but into the next chapter of what had become a much larger story than a disputed airplane seat. The incident that had begun as a personal affront had evolved into a potential turning point. For the airline industry, for corporate accountability, and perhaps for her own understanding of the responsibility that came with her position of influence. Whatever awaited her in that conference room, and in the global tech meeting beyond, Jasmine Washington was ready to face it with the same unwavering determination that had guided her from her modest beginnings to the pinnacle of the financial technology world. Some battles were worth fighting, not just for personal vindication but for the principle they represented and the precedent they established. And this, she knew with absolute certainty, was one of those battles. The private conference room at San Francisco International Airport hummed with tension. Jasmine sat at one end of a polished mahogany table, her posture perfect despite the exhaustion pulling at her. Across from her, Agents Johnson and Kim stood beside a digital display showing surveillance footage, text messages, and financial records, a growing web of evidence linking Bradley Thompson's actions to VenturePay. "The picture is becoming clearer," Agent Johnson explained, gesturing to the display. "Thompson isn't just some random bigot who decided to harass you. He's a contracted consultant for VenturePay who's been involved in at least 4 similar incidents targeting executives from competing firms." Agent Kim advanced the display to show a series of text messages. These communications between Thompson and Victor Reynolds' assistant strongly suggest Reynolds was aware of these operations, despite his denials. Jasmine studied the evidence, her analytical mind processing implications beyond the immediate situation. "So they identified me as a threat because of the global tech deal?" "Exactly," Johnson confirmed. "If Jazz Wallet secures this partnership, it positions you to expand internationally and compete directly with VenturePay's core business model." The question now, Raymond Barnes, the airline CEO who had flown in from headquarters specifically for this meeting, interjected, "is how you wish to proceed, Ms. Washington. The airline is prepared to provide any support you need, whether that's pursuing criminal charges, civil litigation, or simply ensuring you reach your meeting without further incident." Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Darnell. Excusing herself, she answered. "The board is on the line," Darnell said without preamble. "They've been monitoring the situation and want to discuss strategy before your global tech meeting." Putting the call on speaker, Jasmine heard the concerned voice of Elijah Morris, her board chairman. "Jasmine, we've all seen the news. First, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Elijah. Just processing a lot of information." "We've been discussing options," Elijah continued. "The global tech meeting is scheduled in 3 hours. Given everything that's happened, we're prepared to request a postponement. Your safety and well-being come first." Another board member, Patricia Winters, chimed in, "VenturePay's stock is already down 8% since this story broke. Reynolds is facing serious questions from his own board. We're in a position of strength here, we can afford to reschedule." Jasmine listened to her board members debate the relative merits of proceeding with the meeting versus postponing to focus on the legal implications of the day's events. Their concern was genuine, but something about their framing troubled her. "May I speak?" she finally interrupted. When the line fell silent, she continued, "I appreciate everyone's concern, but I think we're missing something important here. This isn't just about our deal with global tech or even about VenturePay's illegal tactics." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "What happened today is part of a pattern that extends far beyond me or our company. Bradley Thompson targeted me because I'm black and because I'm successful. He exploited systemic biases that exist in our society to try to disrupt our business objectives. And he's done this to others who didn't have the resources or platform I have to fight back." The silence on the line was telling. Jasmine continued, "I believe I have a responsibility here that goes beyond our immediate business interests. Yes, we should pursue legal action against Thompson and VenturePay. But more importantly, we need to use this moment to create meaningful change in how these situations are handled." Elijah's voice came through the speaker, thoughtful now. "What are you proposing, Jasmine?" Before she could respond, her phone chimed with another call. This time from Franco Martinez, CEO of Global Tech. "I should take this," she told the board members. "Let me call you back." Switching calls, she greeted Franco, whom she had met several times at industry events but never in formal negotiations. "Jasmine," Franco's accented voice was warm with concern. "I've been watching this situation unfold. Are you all right? Do you need to reschedule our meeting?" "I appreciate your concern, Franco, but no, I intend to keep our appointment." "I admire your resilience," Franco replied. "But please know we would completely understand if you needed time." What happened to you today is unconscionable. Something in his tone gave Jasmine pause, a genuineness that cut through the usual corporate diplomacy. Thank you, Franco. That means a lot. My team and I will be ready whenever you arrive. And Jasmine, we're looking forward to discussing ways we might incorporate anti-discrimination protocols into our joint ventures. If there's one positive outcome from today's events, perhaps it's highlighting the need for systemic change in our industry. After ending the call, Jasmine sat in silence for a moment, a decision crystallizing in her mind. She then rejoined the meeting with the FBI agents and airline executives who had been waiting patiently. I've made my decision, she announced. I will be pressing charges against Bradley Thompson, and I expect a full investigation into VenturePay's involvement in this and similar incidents. Agent Johnson nodded. We're already building the case. With your testimony, we'll have a strong foundation for prosecution. Good, Jasmine continued. But that's not enough. Mr. Barnes, she turned to the airline CEO, your company failed today. Not just me, but every passenger who has experienced similar treatment without the benefit of my resources or public platform. Barnes nodded soberly. You're absolutely right, Ms. Washington. We're already reviewing our training protocols and incident response procedures. I don't want reviews or studies, Jasmine said firmly. I want action. Concrete, measurable changes in how your airline identifies, prevents, and responds to discrimination. As Barnes began to assure her of the airline's commitment to improvement, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Darnell, board still on conference line. They're discussing potential legal strategies against VenturePay. Need your input ASAP. Jasmine excused herself again to rejoin the board call, where she found a heated discussion in progress about potential lawsuits and PR strategies. Everyone, please, she interrupted. I've made my decision, and it's not one I'm willing to debate. The call fell silent. I'm proceeding with the global tech meeting as scheduled. We're not postponing or showing any sign that today's events have disrupted our business objectives. That would be giving Thompson and Reynolds exactly what they wanted. Elijah began to speak, but Jasmine continued, however, this isn't business as usual. I'm going to use this platform, the attention this incident has generated, to address the larger issues at play. I'm announcing a new initiative at the Global Tech meeting, and I need the board's support. What initiative? Patricia asked cautiously. A foundation focused specifically on combating discrimination in corporate spaces, funded initially by Jazz Wallet but designed to work across the tech industry. I want us to develop technologies and protocols that make it harder for incidents like today's to occur and easier for victims to document and address them when they do. The silence that followed was weighted with consideration rather than opposition. Finally, Elijah spoke. It's ambitious, Jasmine. Beyond our core business model. Our core business is financial empowerment, Jasmine countered. We can't empower people financially if they're being systematically excluded from the spaces where financial decisions are made. This isn't a distraction from our mission, it's an extension of it. One by one, the board members voiced their support. Some enthusiastically, others more cautiously, but all ultimately recognizing both the moral imperative and the strategic opportunity in Jasmine's proposal. As she ended the call, a knock at the conference room door announced the arrival of a courier with a package. Agent Kim accepted it, scanned it with a security device, then handed it to Jasmine. Inside was a handwritten note from Taylor Wilson, the young engineer who had defended her on the flight, Ms. Washington. I heard you might be meeting with FBI. Thought this might help. I've time-stamped and annotated the full video. Also included statements from 2 other passengers who experienced similar treatment on previous flights but didn't report it because they felt powerless. We're not powerless anymore. Taylor, the note was paperclipped to a flash drive and business cards from 2 other travelers. As Jasmine reviewed Taylor's materials with the FBI agents, another message arrived. This time from Calvin Harris, the banking executive who had sided with Bradley during the confrontation. "Ms. Washington, I cannot express how deeply I regret my actions today. What I witnessed was wrong, and my response was equally wrong. I defaulted to assumptions that I now recognize as biased and harmful. If you're willing, I would appreciate the opportunity to apologize in person and discuss how my organization can support your work in preventing similar incidents in the future." Jasmine read the message twice, recognizing both the personal regret and the business calculation behind it. Calvin's bank worked extensively with fintech companies. Being identified as an enabler of racial profiling could significantly damage those relationships. Yet there was also an opportunity here, not just for a personal apology, but for institutional change that could affect thousands of employees and millions of customers. "Tell Mr. Harris I'll meet with him after my global tech presentation," she texted back to Darnell. "And ask him to come prepared with specific commitments, not just apologies." As she gathered her materials to prepare for the global tech meeting, Raymond Barnes approached her again. "Ms. Washington, our legal team has prepared several options for compensation, upgrades, miles, premium memberships." Jasmine stopped him with a raised hand. "Mr. Barnes, I don't want compensation. I want transformation. And I believe I'm in a position to help make that happen." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I'd like to establish a formal advisory role for myself with your company's leadership team, focused specifically on anti-discrimination protocols and passenger rights. Not as a paid consultant, but as an advocate with direct access to decision-makers." Barnes looked startled but quickly recovered. "That's an unusual request, but one I'm personally inclined to support. I'd need to discuss it with our board, of course." "Of course," Jasmine agreed. "And while you're discussing it with them, please make it clear that the alternative is a very public lawsuit that would detail not just today's incident but the systemic failures that made it possible." The weight of her words hung in the air between them, not a threat, exactly, but a clear-eyed assessment of her leverage in this moment and her willingness to use it for purposes beyond personal gain. Barnes nodded slowly. "I understand. And for what it's worth, I believe such an advisory role could be tremendously valuable to our organization." As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for Jasmine's secure transport to the global tech offices, she found herself reflecting on the strange journey of this day. What had begun as a routine business trip had evolved into something that could potentially reshape policies and practices across multiple industries. The seat she had refused to surrender had become, in some ways, symbolic of the larger spaces she had fought to occupy throughout her career, spaces where people who looked like her had historically been excluded or marginalized. As she prepared to leave for the global tech meeting, Jasmine received one final message, this one from Elijah. "The board just voted unanimously to support your foundation initiative. We've allocated initial funding of $50 million. Go change the world, Jasmine. We've got your back." With renewed determination, Jasmine gathered her belongings and headed for the door. The global tech meeting awaited, and beyond it, a new chapter in her already remarkable journey, one that would extend far beyond the world of fintech to address fundamental questions of equity, access, and belonging in corporate America. The path ahead would not be easy, but then again, neither had the path that had brought her to this moment. And if there was one thing Jasmine Washington had proven throughout her life, it was that she knew how to navigate difficult terrain, especially when the destination was worth the journey. The global tech headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, its glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun as Jasmine's car pulled into the private underground garage. Security personnel escorted her to an express elevator, their presence a reminder of how quickly her day had transformed from routine business travel to something requiring protective measures. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Martinez is waiting for you in the executive conference room," the security lead informed her as the elevator ascended to the 52nd floor. "Is there anything you need before your meeting?" "Just a moment to gather my thoughts," Jasmine replied, using the elevator's mirrored wall to check her appearance. Despite the day's tumultuous events, she looked composed. Her charcoal suit unwrinkled, her natural hair still perfectly shaped in the short, sophisticated cut that had become part of her professional signature. Only the subtle tension around her eyes hinted at the stress she had endured. The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area where Franco Martinez waited, extending his hand in greeting. "Jasmine, thank you for keeping our appointment, especially after everything that's happened. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to reschedule?" "Absolutely sure," Jasmine replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Some people went to extraordinary lengths to prevent this meeting. I'm not giving them the satisfaction of succeeding." Franco nodded, understanding the subtext. "The boardroom is ready. My team is eager to hear your presentation." As they walked toward the conference room, Jasmine's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Darnell. "Excuse me, I should take this," she told Franco, who stepped aside discreetly. "What's happening?" she asked Darnell without preamble. "VenturePay's stock has dropped 12% and still falling," Darnell reported. "Reynolds has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The FBI has seized documents from his office and home. And Thompson? Still in custody. No bail set yet. He's apparently started cooperating with authorities, probably hoping for leniency." Jasmine processed this information quickly. "What about the airline?" "Barnes has already announced a comprehensive review of their discrimination policies. Their stock took an initial hit but has stabilized as investors respond positively to their crisis management." "Good," Jasmine said. "I'm about to go into the global tech meeting. Have you prepared the additional materials I requested?" "Yes, everything's ready," Darnell confirmed. "The legal team has reviewed it all. You're clear to proceed with the expanded proposal." "Thank you, Darnell. I'll call you after the meeting." Ending the call, Jasmine rejoined Franco, who had been waiting patiently. "Everything all right?" he inquired. "Better than all right," Jasmine replied with a confidence that had been forged through years of overcoming obstacles far greater than a stolen airplane seat. "Shall we begin?" The Global Tech boardroom fell silent as Jasmine concluded the formal portion of her presentation. The partnership proposal she had outlined, integrating JazWallet's financial technologies with Global Tech's international infrastructure, had been met with evident enthusiasm from the assembled executives. "Before we move to questions," Jasmine said, setting aside her presentation remote, "I'd like to address what I'm sure many of you have seen in today's news." The executives exchanged glances. Franco nodded encouragingly. "What happened on that flight was not an isolated incident," Jasmine continued. "It was part of a pattern of discrimination that exists throughout our society, including in the corporate and financial sectors we all inhabit." She paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. "I came here today to propose a business partnership, and I still want that partnership. But I'm also proposing something more fundamental, a commitment to building equity and inclusion into the very architecture of our collaboration." Jasmine opened a new presentation on the room's display, revealing details of the foundation initiative she had discussed with her board. JazWallet is committing $50 million to create the Equitable Access Initiative, focused on identifying and eliminating discriminatory practices in the financial and tech sectors. We'd like Global Tech to be our first major partner in this effort. The room remained silent as she outlined specific programs. From bias training protocols to technological solutions for documenting and addressing discrimination, from recruitment pipelines for underrepresented groups to accountability metrics for executive leadership. When she finished, Franco was the first to speak. "This is considerably more ambitious than what we expected to discuss today." "It is," Jasmine acknowledged. "But today's events have made it clear that we can't separate business objectives from the social contexts in which they operate. The same biases that led to my seat being stolen are present in lending algorithms, hiring practices, venture capital distribution, and countless other aspects of our industry." A Global Tech executive, the only other woman in the room, leaned forward. "Ms. Washington, while I personally find your proposal compelling, I must ask, what's the business case for Global Tech's involvement? Our shareholders expect us to focus on profitable growth, not social initiatives. Jasmine had anticipated this question. The business case is threefold. First, discrimination is expensive, in lost talent, missed opportunities, legal liability, and reputational damage. Second, diverse organizations consistently outperform homogeneous ones across virtually every metric that matters to shareholders. And third, she added with a slight smile, Jazz Wallet is prepared to offer global tech preferred terms on our partnership agreement if you commit to matching our foundation investment. This pragmatic approach, appealing to both idealism and self-interest, shifted the energy in the room. The executives began asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, measurement methodologies, and potential returns on investment. As the discussion progressed, Jasmine's phone vibrated with an incoming message. Glancing down discreetly, she saw a news alert: breaking, airline announces major policy changes following racial profiling incident, CEO pledges zero tolerance, and new training protocols. The news was spreading faster than she had anticipated. Raymond Barnes had clearly decided that swift, decisive action was preferable to the prolonged public relations disaster of appearing hesitant or resistant to change. When the global tech executives took a brief recess to discuss Jasmine's proposals privately, she stepped outside to take another call from Darnell. "You've seen the airline announcement?" he asked immediately. "Just the headline," Jasmine replied. "What else are they doing?" "Barnes is going all in," Darnell reported. Full review of training protocols, new dispute resolution procedures designed specifically to address potential bias, mandatory reporting of all incidents that might involve discrimination, and, this is the big one, they're creating a permanent executive position focused exclusively on passenger equity, reporting directly to Barnes. "That's significant," Jasmine acknowledged, genuinely impressed by the scope of the response. "Any word on who they're considering for the role?" "They've reached out to Dr. Ayanna Johnson from Columbia, the expert on corporate inclusion metrics we tried to recruit last year." "Solid choice." Before Jasmine could respond, another call came through, this one from her broker. "Ms. Washington, I need your immediate authorization," the broker began without preamble. "There's unusual activity in the airline stock, significant purchases from multiple institutional investors. The price is stabilizing above pre-incident levels. If you want to move on your strategy, we need to act now." Jasmine had considered this possibility during the flight, using her considerable financial resources not just to seek redress for herself but to create structural leverage for ongoing change. The decision crystallized in an instant. "Execute Purchase Plan Alpha," she instructed. "Full authorization for the amounts we discussed." "Executing now," the broker confirmed. "I'll send confirmation within the hour." As Jasmine ended the call, she found Franco waiting nearby, having apparently overheard at least part of the conversation. "Purchase Plan Alpha?" he inquired with a raised eyebrow. "Sounds intriguing." Jasmine smiled. "Just ensuring that today's momentum toward positive change doesn't dissipate tomorrow when the news cycle moves on." Franco nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his expression. "You're acquiring a controlling stake in the airline." "Let's just say I'm becoming an invested stakeholder in their transformation," Jasmine replied. "The kind of stakeholder whose voice can't be easily ignored." Franco's expression shifted from surprise to admiration. "The Global Tech Board has reached a decision on your proposals," he said. "We'd like to invite you back in to discuss terms." When Jasmine re-entered the boardroom, she found the atmosphere noticeably warmed. The executives who had seemed hesitant earlier now leaned forward with engaged expressions. "Ms. Washington," began the company's CFO, "we've reviewed both your partnership proposal and your equitable access initiative. The board is prepared to approve both, with full matching funds for the foundation." A ripple of satisfaction moved through Jasmine, but she maintained her professional composure. "I'm pleased to hear that. There's more," Franco added. "We'd like to expand the scope of our collaboration beyond the original parameters. Specifically, we're interested in developing joint technologies focused on identifying and eliminating bias in financial algorithms, an area where both our companies have relevant expertise. The meeting proceeded with a detailed discussion of implementation timelines and resource allocations. By the time they concluded 3 hours later, the partnership had evolved from a straightforward business arrangement into something more transformative, a commitment to reimagining how technology could address systemic inequities rather than reinforce them. As Jasmine prepared to leave, Franco walked her to the elevator. "You've had quite a day," he observed. "Most people would have been derailed by what happened this morning." "I've never been particularly good at being derailed," Jasmine replied with a slight smile. "Even when that's what others have planned for me." Her phone buzzed with a new message, this one from Taylor Wilson, the engineer who had defended her on the flight. "Just saw the airline announcement. You made this happen. Also, crazy rumor going around Twitter that you're buying the airline." "True." As the elevator doors opened, Jasmine's broker called again. "Purchase complete," he reported. "You now own 22% of the airline stock, making you the largest individual shareholder. The board has been notified of your position." "Thank you," Jasmine replied. "Schedule a meeting with their executive team for tomorrow morning before my return flight." As she descended to the ground floor, Jasmine composed a brief response to Taylor, "Not buying the entire airline. Just enough to ensure accountability. Would you be interested in heading up a technical team focused on developing anti-bias protocols? Your resume is impressive, and your integrity even more so. Let's talk when I'm back in Atlanta." By the time Jasmine's car arrived at her hotel, news of her stock purchase had broken across financial media. Her phone was flooded with messages from board members, executives, journalists, and even a contrite voicemail from Calvin Harris reiterating his desire to meet and establish a more productive relationship going forward. Jasmine had expected the attention but was still struck by how quickly events had escalated from a personal confrontation to a movement with potential industry-wide implications. What Bradley Thompson and Victor Reynolds had intended as a simple disruption of her business plans had instead catalyzed exactly the kind of transformative pressure they had hoped to prevent. As she entered her hotel suite, Jasmine found an elegantly wrapped package waiting with a note from Franco and the Global Tech Board. Inside was a small crystal sculpture of a phoenix rising from flames, with an inscription, "From adversity, transformation." The symbolism wasn't lost on her. What had begun as an attempt to remove her from her rightful seat had evolved into an opportunity to secure seats at tables where decisions affecting millions were made, seats that had too often excluded people who looked like her. Later that evening, as final details of the day's events continued to unfold across news and social media, Jasmine addressed the airline's employees directly through a company-wide video conference arranged by Raymond Barnes. "Today began with someone trying to take my seat," she told the thousands of employees watching. "It's ending with me taking a seat on your leadership team, not to punish or criticize, but to partner in creating systems where everyone's right to occupy their space is respected and protected." She outlined her vision for the airline's transformation, not just in policies and procedures, but in fundamental culture. "This isn't about public relations or temporary damage control," she emphasized. "It's about recognizing that true excellence in service can only exist when every passenger and employee is treated with equal dignity and respect." As she concluded her remarks, Jasmine announced the establishment of a scholarship fund for employees' children and a commitment to working directly with flight attendants and gate agents to develop practical, effective anti-bias protocols. "What happened today revealed problems that have existed for generations," she acknowledged. "But it also revealed something powerful. When one person refuses to surrender their rightful place, it creates space for many others to claim theirs as well." The response was immediate and overwhelming, messages of support flooding in from employees at all levels of the organization, many sharing their own experiences of witnessing or experiencing discrimination and expressing hope that genuine change might finally be possible. By midnight, #RightfulPlace was trending across social media platforms, with thousands sharing stories of standing their ground in the face of bias or injustice. The hashtag had transcended the specific incident on Flight 782 to become a rallying cry for dignity and respect across contexts ranging from corporate boardrooms to community organizations. As Jasmine finally prepared for sleep after the longest and most consequential day of her professional life, she received one final message. This one from Nathan Reed, the flight attendant who had initially suggested she give up her seat. "Ms. Washington, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that today changed me. I've spent hours reflecting on how quickly I assumed you were in the wrong and how differently I might have responded if you had been a white man in a suit. I've requested to be included in the first group for the new training program. Thank you for standing your ground. You've taught me a lesson I won't forget." Jasmine didn't respond immediately, recognizing that Nathan's evolution, like that of the airline, the industry, and society itself, would be measured not in words but in actions over time. Change rarely happened in dramatic moments, it accumulated through countless small choices, decisions, and interactions. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Jasmine allowed herself to appreciate the rare alignment of personal vindication with broader progress. What had begun as one more indignity to be navigated had transformed into an opportunity to address the systems that produced such indignities in the first place. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, implementing the global tech partnership, establishing the foundation, restructuring airline policies, managing the inevitable resistance to change. But tonight, for perhaps the first time in her driven life, Jasmine Washington rested in the knowledge that sometimes, the most powerful move wasn't reaching for the next goal but standing firmly in place and refusing to be moved. 6 months later, Jasmine Washington stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of Atlanta's Wilshire Hotel, surveying the audience gathered for the inaugural conference of the Equitable Access Initiative. The room buzzed with energy as corporate executives, civil rights leaders, technology innovators, and policy experts engaged in animated conversations before the final keynote address. "It's time," Darnell murmured beside her, checking his watch. Full house. Over 800 attendees, 22 countries represented, and the live stream has passed 50,000 viewers. Jasmine nodded, taking a moment to center herself before stepping to the microphone. As conversations quieted and attention focused forward, she began without preamble. 6 months ago, I boarded a flight to San Francisco and found someone sitting in my assigned seat, a seemingly minor inconvenience that revealed a major systemic problem. The room fell completely silent, most attendees familiar with the incident that had made international headlines and sparked conversations about discrimination in commercial aviation and beyond. That day could have ended very differently, Jasmine continued. I could have moved to another seat to avoid conflict. The airline could have dismissed the incident as a simple misunderstanding. Law enforcement could have treated it as an isolated case rather than part of a pattern. And all of us could have returned to business as usual once the news cycle moved on. She paused, surveying the attentive faces before her. Instead, we chose transformation. And today, I want to share what that transformation looks like in concrete terms. Using the large screens flanking the stage, Jasmine began presenting data from the initiative's first 6 months of operation. The statistics told a compelling story. The airline had implemented comprehensive anti-bias training for all 12,000 customer-facing employees, resulting in a 72% reduction in reported incidents of discriminatory treatment. The new Washington Protocol for Dispute Resolution, named over Jasmine's modest objections, had been adopted by 6 major airlines, with 4 more scheduled to implement it by year's end. Beyond aviation, Jasmine continued, our partnership with Global Tech has produced the first AI-powered system for identifying potential bias in customer service interactions in real time, now being piloted in 8 Fortune 500 companies. She clicked to the next slide, showing the face of a familiar figure, Bradley Thompson, alongside Victor Reynolds, the former CEO of VenturePay. Mr. Thompson is currently serving an 18-month sentence for fraud, theft, and conspiracy charges, Jasmine stated matter-of-factly. Mr. Reynolds, while avoiding criminal charges, was removed as CEO by his board and is facing multiple civil lawsuits from others who were targeted by similar tactics. These consequences represented justice in a legal sense, but Jasmine had always been more interested in systemic change than individual punishment. She moved quickly to the next slide. More importantly, these events catalyzed the creation of new corporate accountability structures. 43 companies have now adopted our transparency metrics for tracking and addressing bias incidents. 28 have appointed executive-level positions focused specifically on equity and inclusion, not as peripheral, diversity initiatives but as core business functions with substantial authority and resources. As Jasmine continued detailing the initiative's progress and upcoming projects, she noticed Taylor Wilson in the front row, now heading the technical team developing anti-bias algorithms for customer service applications. Beside her sat Nathan Reed, who had become an unexpectedly effective advocate for change within the airline industry after his honest reckoning with his own biases. Calvin Harris occupied a seat near the back. His regional bank, now a significant contributor to the initiative's work in expanding financial access to underserved communities. His initial shame-driven apology had evolved into a genuine commitment to transformation, both personal and institutional. The most important metric, however, isn't captured in these statistics, Jasmine said, moving toward her conclusion. It's measured in the experiences of individuals who now move through spaces previously defined by exclusion and discrimination. She gestured to a young black woman seated in the second row, Zara Johnson, a college student whose video of being removed from a first-class cabin despite having a valid ticket had gone viral 2 years earlier, before protocols existed to address such situations properly. Ms. Johnson recently flew first class from Dallas to Boston without incident, Jasmine noted. A simple experience that should be unremarkable but represents meaningful progress. More significantly, she's now interning with our technical team, helping design the very systems that will prevent others from experiencing what she endured. As Jasmine prepared to introduce the final panel discussion, a flight attendant in uniform, Alicia Carter from the original Flight 782, approached the stage with an envelope. Jasmine accepted it with a questioning look. "This just arrived from Captain Fitzgerald," Alicia explained quietly. "She thought you'd want to see it immediately." Opening the envelope, Jasmine found a press release embargoed until that evening. Federal Aviation Administration announces industry-wide adoption of anti-discrimination standards developed by Equitable Access Initiative. The announcement represented a major victory, elevating voluntary corporate commitments to the level of regulatory requirements that would affect every airline operating in American airspace. Jasmine folded the release and returned to the microphone, deciding to share the news immediately rather than waiting for the official announcement. "I've just received word that the FAA will be implementing our anti-discrimination standards across all commercial aviation," she announced, triggering spontaneous applause throughout the ballroom. This means that what began as one company's response to a single incident will now protect millions of travelers across thousands of daily flights. As the applause continued, Jasmine reflected on the journey of the past 6 months, the countless meetings, negotiations, setbacks, and breakthroughs that had transformed an ugly incident into a movement for meaningful change. The work was far from complete, but the momentum now extended far beyond her individual influence or resources. "We call this conference the New Beginning for a reason," Jasmine said as the applause subsided. "What we've accomplished so far is just the foundation for the work ahead. Real transformation isn't an event, it's a sustained commitment to reimagining and rebuilding systems that have perpetuated inequality for generations." She stepped away from the podium, walking to the edge of the stage to establish a more direct connection with the audience. "6 months ago, someone tried to take my seat because they didn't believe I belonged there. Today, we're not just reclaiming individual seats, we're rebuilding the entire cabin to ensure everyone travels with equal dignity." As Jasmine concluded her remarks and invited the final panel to join her on stage, she noticed a young black girl, perhaps 12 years old, watching intently from the audience. The girl sat beside her mother, who wore the uniform of a commercial pilot. Likely one of the less than 1% of black female pilots in an industry still defined by profound demographic disparities. After the panel and closing remarks, as attendees mingled during the reception, the young girl approached Jasmine somewhat shyly, her mother following a few steps behind. "Ms. Washington," the girl began hesitantly. "My name is Destiny Williams. I watched your video from the airplane when it happened. My mom says you changed everything." Jasmine smiled, kneeling slightly to meet the girl at eye level. "Your mom gives me too much credit. Many people worked very hard to create these changes. I want to start a business someday," Destiny continued, gaining confidence. "Mom says I can do anything if I work hard enough, but sometimes people still try to stop you just because of who you are." The girl's precocious understanding of the complex realities she would face struck Jasmine deeply. It was both heartbreaking and hopeful. A child already aware of societal barriers but not defined or limited by them. "Your mom is right about you being able to do anything," Jasmine said, reaching into her jacket pocket for a business card. "And yes, sometimes people will try to stop you. When that happens, remember that standing your ground isn't just about holding your position, it's about transforming the landscape so others can stand with you." She handed the card to Destiny. "When you're ready to start that business, call me. I'd like to hear your ideas." The girl's eyes widened as she accepted the card with both hands, treating it like a precious artifact. "I will. Thank you." As Destiny and her mother moved away, Jasmine found Darnell at her side, tablet in hand as always. "Final attendance numbers exceeded projections by 22%, he reported. "And the implementation commitments from today's sessions will expand our impact by an estimated 35% over next quarter's projections." Jasmine nodded, still watching Destiny across the room, now excitedly showing the business card to another young girl. "It's not just about the numbers, Darnell," she said softly. "It's about creating a world where she never has to experience what we did, where her right to occupy space isn't constantly questioned or challenged." "We're getting there," Darnell replied, following her gaze. "Slowly, but we're getting there." As the reception continued around them, Jasmine received a notification on her phone. Her final quarterly report as a major shareholder in the airline had been released to investors. The company had not only recovered from the initial negative publicity surrounding the incident but had emerged stronger, with improved customer satisfaction metrics and employee retention rates that industry analysts attributed directly to the new anti-discrimination protocols and corporate culture initiatives. The following morning, Jasmine would board another flight, ironically, the same route that had started this journey 6 months earlier. But this time, she would board an aircraft operated by a company that had fundamentally reimagined its approach to passenger dignity and employee empowerment. As she prepared to leave the conference, thanking organizers and participants, Jasmine reflected on how a moment of confrontation had catalyzed a movement for transformation. The incident on Flight 782 hadn't simply been about one passenger refusing to surrender her seat, it had revealed the fragility of systems that permitted such incidents to occur routinely and without consequence. In the months since, Jasmine had received thousands of messages from people sharing similar experiences, not just on airlines but in restaurants, hotels, retail establishments, and countless other spaces where belonging was still too often determined by appearance rather than right. Their stories had reinforced her conviction that addressing these issues required not just individual courage but systemic change, new protocols, technologies, training approaches, and accountability structures that could transform environments from the inside out. The work would continue long after this conference concluded, extending into areas and industries far beyond aviation. But something fundamental had shifted. A demonstration that when injustice was met not just with resistance but with reimagination, transformation became not just possible but inevitable. What would you do if someone tried to take what rightfully belongs to you? Would you stand your ground like Jasmine, even when facing tremendous pressure to back down? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if Jasmine's story of courage and transformation inspired you. Remember, sometimes the most powerful move isn't reaching for something new, but refusing to surrender what's already yours. Thank you for watching, and remember, your seat at the table matters. See you in the next video. Jasmine Washington's journey teaches us that standing your ground against discrimination isn't just about personal vindication, it's about creating systemic change. When faced with injustice, the easiest path is often accommodation, but true transformation requires courage to confront uncomfortable situations head-on. This story demonstrates how bias operates on multiple levels, from interpersonal interactions to corporate structures that enable discrimination. The incident reveals how quickly people make assumptions based on appearance rather than facts, and how these biases persist regardless of one's achievements or status. It also highlights the power of allyship. Taylor's intervention made a critical difference in validating Jasmine's experience. Most importantly, this story shows that addressing discrimination effectively requires both individual courage and institutional change. Jasmine's response wasn't just about reclaiming her seat, it was about rebuilding systems to protect everyone's dignity. Her use of financial, social, and moral capital transformed a painful experience into a catalyst for industry-wide progress, proving that sometimes our most difficult moments can become our most meaningful contributions. Have you ever had to stand your ground against discrimination or witnessed someone else facing unfair treatment? Share your experience in the comments below. How did you respond, and what did you learn from that situation? Your story could inspire others facing similar challenges. If this journey of courage and transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and change. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need encouragement to stand their ground today. Remember, change begins when one person refuses to accept injustice as inevitable. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to claim your rightful place in every area of your life.